Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our May 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast series event, Streamlining Security. I'm Alan Falcon, CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us here this afternoon. Before we get into the content of the session, do want to cover a couple of quick things. First off, you'll notice that the audio is muted. This prevents any background noise from interfering with the session here today. So if at any point in time you have questions, along the top or right side of your screen, there's a icon that'll open the Q&A window. That's the best way to reach me. It lets me track what questions have been asked and make sure we get them all answered before we leave today. The session is being recorded. We generally get them posted within about 24 hours. We'll send you a link. Please feel free to share that with any associates or colleagues you think might find this content informative. This third Tuesday at 3 webcast is one of many resources that we offer in the Resource Center on our website. We have a second webcast series that we do on occasion called Coffee and Clouds. All of our past webcast recordings are present. We have an online library of white papers and ebooks, our own and from other sources, as well as our blog and a monthly newsletter and a weekly newspaper where we collate stories of interest to small and mid-sized enterprises in the area of technology and cloud computing. So please feel free to hit the website and check that out. A deep dive into a little bit of the resources we have related to the topic we're on today. We do have a number of blog posts. I won't read through all the titles there, but over the last couple of months, we've covered a number of aspects of cybersecurity and the impact it's having on small and mid-sized businesses and ways they can protect themselves, as well as a service update we're having for all of our existing customers where we're adding advanced threat protection for all of our customers unless they explicitly opt out of that service, understanding the risks involved and the potential impact. Additionally, we'll provide a little more information later on. We're offering currently a free rapid security assessment. It's a 3 to 4 minute survey. We do some additional research. We'll provide you with a report benchmarking you against some best practices, identifying gaps, and the cost estimate to fill those gaps so you can see how different security features and capabilities might impact your monthly spend and your overall IT budget. So there's some great resources available that we have again on the website in our resource center. So today we're going to sort of divide the time here today into three general areas. One, where we want to focus when we talk about cyber attacks, how you can avoid attacks, or more importantly, avoid attacks from being successful and prevent that from happening. And then some of the realities, both harsh and not so harsh, about the world we live in and what comes in. And as promised in the write-up for the section, we're not going to go hyperbole or marketing lingo or scare tactics around the risks. We want to take a very pragmatic approach to cybersecurity because we honestly believe, and we're probably to blame ourselves, that constant harping about cybersecurity and cyber attacks, we as business owners, we become numb to it and sort of discount the message, which causes us to hesitate or avoid acting, which increases risk. So in a very pragmatic approach, when we talk about cyber attacks, we're going to talk about two in particular. We're talking about ransomware. It's still out there. We still hear about it. It still occasionally hits the media coverage. We're going to do this because right now this is still the most common type of successful ransomware attack. And really, these attacks are pretty simple in nature. They generally come in using email. Sometimes even they can be initiated by phone with behavioral engineering and then sending follow-up information. There can be malicious links, not just in an email, but on a web page or a piggyback download in auto content on web pages, some of which might be hacked web pages that you actually trust. The second type of attack we're going to focus on today is the business email compromise attack. And we've done a lot, in particular, if you look at our blog post we have a Coffee and Clouds webcast specifically to real estate agents and brokers about this, because this is the most costly type of cyber attack for small and mid-sized enterprises. A business email compromise attack is one where someone gains enough information about you, either through public sources or by gaining access to your systems, that they're able to impersonate you, either individually or your company, and basically get people you interact with to send them money. And so this often takes the form of fake invoices. In the case of real estate agents and brokers, we've seen agents whose identities have been compromised and accounts have been compromised, that the cyber attackers are sending emails to their clients saying, hey, your offer that was rejected, the other deal fell through. If you still want the house, we need you to wire the money, today, here's the information. And the cyber attackers are getting the real estate agent's clients to send them the money. And so this type of threat isn't as well known. There's less awareness, less media coverage, in part because it's not as prevalent. It's incredibly embarrassing because, well, you've been victimized on the attack. It's your customers, your vendors, others who are the actual monetary victims in most cases. Additionally, a business email compromise attack is a more complex attack because there are multiple phases. Often it starts with a phishing attack, which gains, where they get credentials and gain access to your system. There's then what's known as advanced persistent attack. This is where they put malware on your computer that can capture activity on a computer network, log it, copy it up to a server somewhere where they can analyze it, which gives them the information they need to impersonate you from a specific email address or even just impersonate your domain. And so when we look at the anatomy of a business email compromise attack, it generally starts with you making a mistake. Now, it's not always the case. Sometimes there's malware that comes down in a piggyback download for a website or, other means. But in most cases, it's you've opened an email and clicked on something, an attachment with a hidden download in it. You've clicked on a bad link and something gets downloaded, or you've responded to a phishing email and provided enough information that people can get your identity. Another source of identities that make business email compromise attacks possible are third-party breaches. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. The second step is that with access to your system, spyware is installed. And this captures your actions. And the reason this is important is it's not just about getting usernames and passwords. They're going to intercept emails or be able to read emails. So they can get phrasing that you use or standard email templates. If you send a lot of repetitive information, you've got them templated out. They're going to get your language and your style of communication and the nature of communication. How do you send an invoice or a reminder about a past due invoice? Those types of things are actually going to save your words and use them against you or use them against your clients as well. And once they have that in place, the attacker can pretend to be you. And they can potentially send the email to your clients from your actual account, or they can set up an independent account on a different service, but they have enough information where they can pretend to be you. And if your domain at the domain level isn't protected well enough, then they can pretend to be you in a pretty effective way that even sophisticated recipients won't detect that it's spam, either the human or the systems themselves. And so the attacker pretends to be you, starts communicating with your customers or your vendors. Next thing you know, that's the target of the theft, and they'll get your client or your vendor or your business partner, whomever, to transfer money to them. Okay, and that's sort of the anatomy and the flow of a business email compromise attack. And again, on the one hand, you're a victim because it's been your account that's been compromised, but your customers, your clients are the ones being victimized for the money. And interestingly enough, in many states that have information privacy laws, if you have a data breach that allows a business email compromise attack and your customers are victims, you can be liable, both civilly and criminally. And we'll talk about that briefly a little bit later on as well. And so we talked about protection and prevention against these attacks. And again, there are other attacks and there are other vectors that come in. These are the most popular, again, the most common attacks, the most costly attacks, and the most frequent way of getting attacked. But we talk about protection and prevention. The first thing we need to talk about is behavior, yours and those of your teams. And really making sure that you and your team know how to behave appropriately to minimize the risk of being a victim of attack or being attacked or having a successful attack is probably the best way to phrase it. So you should be, have an understanding of cyber attack risks and threats. The fact that you're here today on this webcast is a good starting point to learn. There are other learning sources. In fact, there are services where you can actually test people's knowledge and, by sending fake phishing emails and see who clicks and assess who might need additional training. Folks should understand the impact of a successful attack. We'll talk about that a little bit today as well, a little later on. and know what to look for and when to be suspicious, particularly in inbound email messages. So for example, if anyone, if any vendor or company that you make payments to, if you get an email that says, hey, our payment information has changed, and they give you new instructions for mailing or wiring, particularly payments, you probably want to call and double check or take a really close look at that email to make sure it's not an impersonation and you're not being duped into sending money that you owe the vendor someplace else. And so it's important to know that your staff, if they, when they see something, they should say something. If they think a message is suspicious, they shouldn't click on links. They shouldn't open attachments. They should report it and have it investigated. And then there's, something that's a little more philosophical in nature here, and that accept that security is a necessary inconvenience. And oftentimes we see people who implement security features and over time they disable them. Why? Because it is a pain. It takes time, particularly when you're in a hurry or rushed or on a deadline, to have security measures like multi-factor authentication in place. And certainly if you've ever been caught trying to log into a system where you don't have your phone handy and you can't get the code or open up the authenticator app because you don't have your phone next to you, it can be downright, it can be downright, disturbing and disruptive of your work. And so you want to accept that security is a necessary inconvenience, sort of the price we pay for the environment we live in. And so this is all things that are, really human behavior, because the human element introduces the most risk when it comes to cybersecurity. And so some knowledge, some awareness, some good behaviors, understanding what to do, what not to do. Additionally, there are other behaviors that aren't directly related to you and your business, such as encouraging people to use radically unique passwords, to not use your business email address for any third-party service that isn't directly business related, can minimize exposure as well, particularly as third-party breaches can trigger you being a target and can trigger action to try and gain access to your account and other accounts in your domain. Moving on to prevention and protection, there's some, again, here we're trying to be laser focused and streamline things. So your methods and what we do should address the commonly used attack methods. They should cover every step of complex attacks. And we'll talk about that, sort of, the front end of an attack, what happens midstream, and at the execution point of the attack, and what you can do to protect yourself in those more complex attacks. You want to minimize a single point of failure, right? So that, should someone, get access to or guess or calculate your username and password and they get in, how can you then have that not be the single point of failure where you're a victim of ransomware or your clients become victim of business email compromise? Because once they're in, they're going to do other things. And if you can prevent them from doing those other things, you've now eliminated that compromised identity as a single point of failure. And your system should include both passive and active measures, and we'll talk about some of those as well. So when we look at complex attacks, because if you can protect against a complex attack, you can protect against the most simple ones. So what are some of the things at the front end of the attack, right? This is, how do they even get in the first place? How does the attack start? What can we do to prevent that from even happening? And so here's what you want to protect against, right? For ransomware, it's malicious links and attachments. It's piggyback downloads from websites. It's macros that, reach out to third-party unknown servers and sources, and corrupt websites, right? This is, and predominantly we know that 2/3 of cyber attacks start with an email. So really, malicious links and attachments or malicious websites that you're linked to, if you click on a link in one of these emails, is really where you're looking to protection from. And again, ransomware is a pretty simple attack. The sooner they can get the ransomware installed on a machine on your network, it will then replicate onto other machines, encrypt, etc. Right? So they want that download to happen. And links and attachments and piggyback downloads from websites are common ways. And what do we mean by a piggyback download? Even if you've been onto a trusted, let's say, news site, there's often third-party content. And if you click on that third-party content and there's a video that auto-plays, a good hacker can actually attach malware into that video file. So when that video starts to autoplay, the malware is downloaded and installed on your system. And we see that in other aspects of corrupt websites as well. When we talk about protecting against business email compromise, it's all of the above plus the phishing attack. And it's a phishing attack not just because they're trying to gain credentials, but at the front end, you're trying to prevent them from getting additional information about you and about your identity and about who you are, what you do, and how you do it, so that they can't impersonate you down the road. And so at the front end, what are some straightforward methods you can use to provide these protections? Advanced threat protection applied to inbound email message will validate your emails before delivery. It'll look at matching reply information, domain information, IP address information, but it will also, the better tools will, in a sandbox environment, test your links and the attachments. So effectively, that email goes into a secure environment. The links are clicked automatically. Attachments are open. There's an analysis. Are the links going where you think they should be going based on the content of the email and the visible URL? And is it legitimate? Is that a safe site? If you open attachments, is there any indication of inappropriate behavior, that it's malware? It's not a picture. It's not a PDF file. In reality, it's something else. There's a script or software that's going to run or try to load. And if there is anything in terms of advanced threat or more traditional virus or malware built into the email, it gets blocked, either quarantined or rejected. Next-gen endpoint protection. This is this is not the consumer grade stuff you get for free when you buy a Windows PC that comes pre-installed and then they hit you up for the overly priced subscription down the road. Next-gen endpoint protection actually, in addition to looking at virus profiles and patterns, will actually look at the behavior of files in the system as files are opened. And if anything is out of whack, it's going to catch that behavior and block it and notify you. So it's a more advanced way of protecting malware that's been downloaded or is attempting to be downloaded, or a file that was downloaded and hasn't opened yet, from actually taking action to infect or endanger your machine. And the third method here is DNS web protection. And this is really about blocking malicious websites, one that are known to be bad or have been corrupted, as well as filtering web content, right? So if you're displaying a web page and it's predominant in its text, and there's something coming down that's not text, or there's content embedded in an image or with an image file or a video file, you want that to get caught and blocked before it actually reaches your computer. And that's where DNS and web protection comes in. The DNS side of it prevents DNS attacks like denial of service and DNS spoofing, which can also cause problems. And so that's at the front end. And the goal here is keep people out, keep them from getting your identity, keep you and your users from being duped into providing information or accidentally letting something install or giving away information that would give someone access to your systems. Okay, that's the front end protection. Midstream is in the middle, right? This is where something's already happened. It's gotten past your front end protection. With ransomware, what you're looking to stop right now is the installation, execution, and spread of the encryption virus. Okay, so maybe it's on one machine. You don't want it to be able to run. You don't want to be able to, share itself across the network, and find other systems that it can come on and self-install and execute. With business email compromise, now you're trying to protect yourself from access to email accounts and services, as well as the system accounts. You want to block the attacker's ability to monitor and log actions. You want to keep them from capturing and analyzing any content you have, and you want to keep identity and credentials secure. You don't want additional usernames and passwords to other systems to become available. And so in effect here, what you're saying is, you're sort of in, but we want to make that useless. We don't want you to be able to do anything with it. So here, the number one thing you can do is use multi-factor authentication. Why? It requires physical action before a compromised identity can be used. So if someone has, for example, if someone were to figure out my Google Workspace username and password, for example, that's great. When they go to use it, they're going to be challenged. And that challenge is tied to my cell phone or an authenticator app or a physical security key in a way that if they're not me, it's nearly impossible to bypass that second level of protection. And in many respects, Microsoft will say that they did a study and found that once an identity was compromised, multi-factor authentication is able to prevent anywhere from 92 to 99% of the attacks from moving forward. Pretty effective. The second method is back to that next-gen endpoint protection. Why? Because the really good tools in this space won't just identify and alert you to that suspicious activity, but will actually roll back the actions of the file or actions taken on files to halt the attack and back it out and prevent it from spreading. And so it's a higher level of protection than just saying, hey, you've got a problem, go clean your system. It's, hey, you've got a problem, we've stopped it, we've rolled it back to a point where we know your system's clean, cease and desist, get it off the system, deal with it now, right? And beyond next-gen endpoint protection, there's a new set of services coming out. We'll be offering it soon called Managed Detection and Response. And this is where not only do you detect the malware, do you stop it and roll it back, but a security operations center gets notified and people respond. They contact you to say, hey, this computer you're working on has a problem, we're going to clean it. Or do you want us to clean it now or later, right? They'll reach out, there's a service element to it. So that's the midstream protection and methods. At the execution point of the attack, in ransomware, we've already talked about preventing the data from getting encrypted. We see that as a midstream activity. The endpoint of many ransomware attacks is also exfiltration of files. We're going to take files off your system to see if they have value or information that they could use in further attacks against you or against others. And for business email compromise, the execution really is, when does the identity or domain impersonation happen that the messaging goes out to your customers, to your contacts, asking them to do things that they shouldn't do that'll cost them money and hurt you reputation-wise, operationally, and financially. And so the methods here, still again, that next-gen endpoint protection provides that rollback of suspicious activities, and we'll add on to that the managed detection and response. But here for the email, particularly the business email compromise, there's 3 things you can do with your domain settings for your email services. And the third one does involve a service because of the reporting component, but Sender Policy Framework, DKIM, and DMARC. So Sender Policy Framework, or SPF, is a DNS record that you put in for each domain you send emails from that lists all of the IP addresses for valid senders, right? So that a recipient can, when they get your email, can look at the physical address where the message came from, compare it to that list, and reject email messages, flag them as spam if they don't match. It's not a perfect system because it is possible for a good hacker to spoof IP addresses, but it certainly mitigates risk and helps protect your email and your domain identities from impersonation. The second protocol is Domain Key Identified Email, or DKIM. And this takes a different approach. This says, okay, we're gonna take the core content of your message and we're going to encrypt it and share the key so that we can certify that that portion of the email, that content, and some of the header information has not been tampered with. And so DKIM prevents identity impersonation or domain impersonation attacks that involve altering the structure of the email or intercepting messages and forwarding them on with different information. So it's not uncommon, or it hasn't been uncommon, for example, in some identity impersonation attacks, for the attackers actually to have filters installed in your email account that take certain messages and literally forward it to them outside. Then they can reply and redirect and edit the content, or they'll intercept an email you send to one of your clients, alter the email, and let it continue. DKIM helps prevent those methods of attack because you're able to certify that content of the message, certain content, hasn't been altered. DMARC is domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. And this assumes that you've got SPF and DKIM installed and configured properly. And on top of it, it combines the two to basically not only say, is this the right IP address? Is this the right source domain? Has the email not been identified? But to the recipient, it says, here's what to do if it's suspicious: to quarantine it, reject it, let it through. And so you get reporting back on the deliverability of your messages. So you have visibility, actually, if someone attempts to impersonate your domain or your identity, and those messages are then blocked by the recipient by following the rules and the policies you've set up. Now, all three of these are settings that you make in your domain name service or DNS records. DMARC works best if it's done with a service. Why? Because you're getting reports back from the recipient email servers, and those go to a specific email address. And if that content isn't evaluated, you have no way of generating alerts or being aware of changes or being, having risks or potential, impersonation attacks identified. There's too much information that gets fed back to you to look at that even on a twice a day basis. For every email you send, you're getting a report back. And so to filter through humanly is not really practical or possible. Having a DMARC service in place will take that information, analyze it, process it, collate it, and present you information in a usable format so we know how to act and ensure your protections are sound and things are working and everything's in place. So to summarize protection, there's really two levels I've talked about. This is sort of looking at the same thing in a different angle. When you're looking at protecting specific accounts, people, devices, then it's tools like multi-factor authentication, encrypting your data at rest, as well as in transit. We haven't really talked about that, so I'll digress a little bit. In the mid-tier or mid-attack portion of a complex cyber attack, if the data on your hard drive is encrypted, it's effectively, so long as it's not a method that's easily decrypted, I should caveat. If that data is well encrypted, it has no value. It really can't be used. And again, so someone might crack into your account or they might gain access to your PC, but if the data sitting on your disk is encrypted in a way that it's not easy to break, that data is still effectively secured and has no value to the attackers. So we want to make sure that not only is your data information encrypted in transit, which is done through encryption and security protocols built into your systems and services, but also making sure that data, whether it's in the cloud, on a server, on your laptop, on a PC, is encrypted when it's sitting on the disk as well. You want advanced threat protection for all email accounts, even the service accounts where no one acts, because attacks can be successful there. We've talked about next-gen endpoint protection, DNS web protection, and managed detection and response. And these are generally done on a per-user basis or a per-device basis. At the domain level, it's those domain settings and services, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, that really help on the towards the end of the complex attack. It's validating that email going out, you're not generating spam, that no one's spoofing you, that no one's impersonating your email or domain. It improves the trustworthiness and the deliverability of your email as well. And now for where the money is, right? Some of these services are free. It's a matter of configuration. Maybe there's some money into expertise. We can certainly come in as a project and help you get these implemented up and running. And some come with a cost. And we'll talk about what it costs and what you're looking at on a per user basis towards the end of the session. But these are all going to be relatively small investments to provide a pretty high level of security. And I talked about the real estate agents who had business email compromise attacks. One agent we spoke with is that we're looking for new IT services post-attack. They had they became aware of what was happening, were able to put a stop to it in 4 hours. But in that 4-hour time frame, that agent's clients sent more than $250,000 to the thieves across multiple clients, those different amounts across multiple clients, but a pretty heavy impact on his clients and eventually really on his own reputation and his business and that of the brokerage and the brand that he worked for. Okay, so let's talk about some of the realities. And I said, there's some harsh realities, there's some not so harsh realities, right? The first reality is that human factor is the biggest factor when it comes to email security. If you really want your business to be completely secured, don't let your employees leave the building and don't let them talk to anyone else ever or interact with anyone ever, because human behavior is relatively easy to exploit. And whether it's intentional or it's unintentional, human action enables cyber attacks. We talked about some of the hard realities that prevention and protection comes with some costs. Much of it, as I've shown, will be free, but some do build costs into your fixed or variable cost structure for your business. And it comes with some inconvenience, multiple steps to log in, multiple passwords, or the addition of a password management system or single sign-on infrastructure, additional steps for accessing, time and effort to manage permissions. There's dollars involved, soft and hard dollars. There's inconvenience to the user. And while you want to strike a balance, you want to make sure you're not setting yourself up to fail from a protect and prevent standpoint. The third component here, which we haven't talked about yet today, is that prevention and protection is not perfect. It never is. The best laid plans can be circumvented. It's a game. I almost put up a graphic of Tom and Jerry because it's a real cat and mouse game. As fast as the industry comes up with a way to protect against one threat, hackers, cyber attackers find other threats and other exploits and other things that they can use to bypass the protections we put in place. So it's a constant cat and mouse chase. Some people liken it to the whack-a-mole game. New threats pop up, we address them, the next threat pops up. Therefore, it's important that you plan for your response and your recovery should you be the victim of a successful attack. And we really want you to put a focus on business continuity, because it's not just how you respond to your customers. It's not just how quickly you can get your data back. It's, can you operate your business while you're doing that? And what's the disruption to your business? We know that, over half of small businesses that are victims of a cyber attack will fail within 6 months. And oftentimes it's not really because of the direct financial impact of the attack. It's because the attack is so disruptive to their business operations that it damages their reputation, it hurts their cash flow, and has other business operating impacts that really cause the business to stumble and become unstable and fail. And so when we talk about the business impact of a breach, I start out with trust and reputation. You breach your client's data, or you have a breach and they end up sending thousands of dollars to a cyber attacker. It's your trust and reputation that's damaged, and they may or may not want to do business with you. For sure, it's a horror story. They're going to share it with their friends and they're going to share it with business associates. And people who've never worked with you, who you approach, will probably have heard this story and be hesitant to engage. There's legal ramifications. Most states now have required reporting for certain types and natures of breaches, and you can have civil actions not only from your client, but from government agencies. So for example, and that leads to financial liability and impact, fines and penalties from government entities or industry organizations, such as those for PCI compliance if you handle credit cards, and civil liability as well from customers as well as government entities. And this can be significant. So for example, the data privacy laws here in Massachusetts basically state that by law, there's no such thing as an accidental breach. There's no such thing as simply being negligent. If you have a breach of personal identifiable information in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's assumed to be because of gross negligence, and therefore any damages awarded in a civil case are automatically tripled. So it can be significant financial impact. And finally, there's impact of a breach on your operations. One, you're going to be trying to recover your data and recover your reputation and keep your business running at the same time you're trying, at the same time. And those are conflicting. And we have a number of folks who we've met who, following a breach, they did the right thing. They reported it to, the local authorities. Those local authorities did the right thing and contacted the FBI. The FBI, sometimes the Secret Service, will respond as well. And one of the things they often do is they will seize all of your computer equipment for the forensics analysis and for evidentiary searches. And so even though you're a victim of a crime, the method of that victim, the very systems you need to run your business are now seized. You don't have them, potentially, not just for days, potentially for weeks or months. And so operationally, it can destroy your business. And know that if you have cyber insurance, the decision whether or not to contact authorities and the depth of a forensics analysis can also happen from, and the need for forensics analysis can happen from the cyber insurance company as well. So for folks who say, well, gee, if I get hacked, I just won't call the police. Now, if you have a cyber insurance policy, one, you might have no choice. You might need to file a police report in order to collect on the insurance. And secondly, your cyber insurance company may want to do that forensics analysis. So how much does all of this cost? As I mentioned earlier, some of the stuff is free. Multi-factor authentication in most cases can be implemented without additional cost. Granted, you can pay for more sophisticated systems or to build in single sign-on and make the process a little less inconvenient. There's a money versus convenience issue, but basically today most computer systems and software services have multi-factor authentication. You can turn it on at no additional cost. All of our operating systems today have the option to activate encryption of disk and of files. You should activate it. Again, they're third-party tools that are more sophisticated, have more management capabilities to them, but you can do this for free. Other than some expertise you might tap into, SPF and DKIM records in your DNS don't cost you anything extra. Now, when you look at the cost of protecting your business and everything, for less than $1 per day per user, and really this can be as low as 50 or 60 cents per user per day, you can have advanced threat protection, your next-gen endpoint protection, DNS web protection, DMARC services. And granted, the protocol is free. The service that actually analyzes it and guides you and makes it work well will have a fee associated with it, and then managed detection response. And so it's an affordable option. It doesn't have to break the bank. And you can have that streamlined security that's going to really address the most common and the most costly types of attack. I've talked a little bit about cyber insurance, and I just want to say that cyber insurance is no longer enough. Right? And the fact is, if you have a breach, you may actually not be covered or not be covered in the way you expect. And why is that? Right now, cyber insurance companies facing unexpected or larger than anticipated losses due to the number of cyber attacks have started cracking down. So you remember when you got your policy, your insurance agent or your IT consultant probably completed a checklist or had you complete a checklist. That really determines how much whether or not they'll write the policy, and it often will determine how much your premiums will be or what your level of risk or coverage, what level of risk they assign to you, what level of coverage they're willing to provide. What we're seeing now is in most cases, cyber insurance companies are requiring that you demonstrate compliance with your policy application documents before they'll settle the claim. And so we're aware of a couple of companies, for example, that when their IT provider filled out the security portions and best practices portion of the cyber insurance application, they checked off that that they have that they have regular full backups, and that they checked off that they validated those backups at least twice a year. And so what they basically were telling the insurance companies, not only do we do backups, we check to make sure the backups are usable, and we test restore at least twice a year. They had a cyber insurance claim. They had a small breach. The scope of the breach wasn't that great, but enough that they wanted to implement the policy to cover the cost of remediation and repair and reimburse some customers. The cyber insurance company came in and said, okay, we need to see the audit trail of your last 2 backup tests and your validations. Now, it turns out they had done 1, but they also didn't document it in a way that was acceptable. So the insurance company looked and said, wait a minute, you told us that not only did you back up your data, but that twice a year you validated your backup and recovery process. You can't demonstrate that you're doing it. You misrepresented yourself on your application. Therefore, we're not going to file the claim, and your policy is null and void. And so that's a growing issue. And so understanding the expectations of your cyber insurance company reinforces the need to have the tools and the systems and the processes and the procedures in place. So what happens in case of emergency? There's 2 aspects. We talk about response and recovery, right? And certainly activating your cyber insurance is part of the response. There are other aspects as well. Depending on the nature of the breach and where you're located, there's a good chance you have governmental or regulatory or industry regulatory notification requirements, right? So a breach of credit card information, for example, in Massachusetts, you have to notify the Attorney General's office within so many business hours. Actually, I think it's 72 hours right now. And you also have to notify your bank and your credit card processing service, right? And so there's industry and governmental regulatory notifications there. You probably have to do some communicating with your customers, your employees, your vendors, let them know what's going on, what the next steps are, the scope of the risk, how they can get more information, that you'll share more information as things go on. You might have to have a forensics investigation. This could be required by law enforcement, your cyber insurance company, or you might decide it's a good idea so that you know what happens. You can make sure that you're protected against it. And you have to prepare for potential litigation defense, knowing that if your breach costs other people money or puts other people or businesses at risk, in this day and age, certainly you can expect civil action. And that action can actually be from customers and other businesses or individuals. It can also be from the governmental entities who might take administrative action through the courts against you. On top of that response, you still have to recover, right? You have to restore your lost or damaged data and files. Meanwhile, you might have to work around unavailable systems, all while wanting a quick return to operations. And ideally, you want to get up and running again while you're cleaning, repairing, replacing any impacted devices, systems, applications, and data. In other words, wouldn't it be great, and this is where the continuity, we talked about the focus on continuity. This is where continuity comes in, folks, that says, hey, wait a minute, if I have a laptop that gets, a cyber attack and gets, encrypted, excellent. I know it's probably going to take 24 to 48 hours to fully clean that laptop, rebuild it, and get it ready for, reinstall everything, get it ready for me to use again. Well, how do I run my business? How do I do my job in the meantime? Now, it's great if I have other computers and laptops hanging around that I can use. Some of us do, many of us don't. But wouldn't it be great if there was a way that I could take any device with a web browser, bring up a safe image of that laptop from before the attack, and then continue working while someone else, my IT staff's, an outside service, and whoever's on my team that does this for me, gets that original laptop up and running. And so business continuity is designed to give you a way to bring up an image of your environment, all of it or key parts of it, in a way that you can return to operations while the rest of the recovery effort goes on, and then switch back to your original equipment, your original systems, once the recovery effort is complete. Now, this is, the example I gave was, hey, what if my laptop's down for 48 hours? Well, it gets, repaired. Worst case, we have a breach and law enforcement takes all the laptops in my office that people have been using as evidence and for the forensic search, and it's gone for 3 weeks. So the impact on your business can be short-term or long-term. You need a way to work around those unavailable systems, quickly return to normal operations as best you can while all of this other activity is happening so that you're not dead in the water. And having that continuity plan in place is really what we say, there's good, there's better, and there's best. And that's the best, right? Good is, hey, back up and restore, have a copy on premise, have a copy in the cloud. I can get my data and files back, hopefully from a point in time close to, but immediately before the attack corrupted any data. Better is to have system images. So you can restore a system, whether it's a server or specific PCs quickly. Again, an image from before the attack, right? So how often you take the image, how often you do the backups is important. Which devices you cover is important as well. So you may not need to spend the money on every single laptop, but certainly key functions in your business should be protected because there's local data on those machines, even if you are fully cloud. And for key personnel, you probably want those protected as well. And so you have that backup and restore, you have the system in, images, that's good, that's better. Best are the continuity services I've been talking about, where at the very least, critical systems and services and essential users, PCs, laptops, what have you, have a continuity service so that if something happens to those systems, services, or PCs, you have the ability to run a recent image, a safe image of that machine, and get back up and running while the actual machine, you run it virtually in a cloud data center, wherever, but that actual machine or actual application or service gets repaired or replaced. And so what are the action steps? First off, we want you to assess your risks and needs. We're offering a free rapid security assessment, bit.ly/SMBRSA, all caps. The all caps is important. It will take you 3 to 4 minutes to answer the questions and fill out the survey. We'll take that information. We'll do some independent research about your domains and your email service. We got the tools to do that. It's non-intrusive. We're not trying to attack or get into your system at all. We're looking at publicly available information. And we'll send you a report identifying what you've got in place, what you don't, why you might need it, and a cost estimate to put it in place. With that understanding of your risk and your needs, you can then, and we'll help you do this, define your value proposition. What's the cost going to be? What's the risk that you're facing, and what's the reward by having it in place? And what's the cost of inaction? If you don't do something, you get a breach. What happens? What's the impact on your business? Soft dollars, hard dollars, reputation, operationally, all the areas we've talked about throughout the session today. At that point, you can plan your solution. You may or may not want or need to do everything we recommend. We'll try and prioritize that and say, if you only got, if you do everything, it's $15 a user per month. But if you only spend 10, here's the things we would do first. So plan your solution. What actions you're going to take, what products and services you're going to use, and then don't forget to execute. Too often we see people put plans in place. We sometimes even see them pay for services and actually never fully deploy them and fully put them into use. And so at this point, I've covered a lot of ground and a lot of materials. I'm going to open it up for questions. So open that questions window using the icon on the top or the right-hand side of your screen. Additionally, you can contact us at info@cumulusglobal.com. You can also contact me directly, Falcon@cumulusglobal.com. My phone number is there too. I'm telling you, don't leave me a voice message. Don't call and leave a voice message. I'm horrible at checking and responding to voicemail. I don't have an assistant. I read all of my own emails. Send me an email message. I will get back to you or have a member of my team. At this point, while I'm waiting to see if anyone has any questions in the live session, I want to thank those who are watching this webcast on demand. Thank you for taking time out to view it. Hopefully this information has been useful. Please contact us if you have any questions or would like to speak to one of our cloud advisors, and have a great day.